All right, let's dive right into this. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're exploring a deeply, deeply unsettling environment, the dead of night. Working the night shift brings this incredibly unique psychological vulnerability with it. You're awake when the rest of the world is dead asleep, just operating in this silent, isolated little bubble. And as we're going to see today, by analyzing 4 true accounts, when that fragile bubble is pierced, the results can be absolutely terrifying. Now, the expectation for a night shift job is usually pretty mundane, right? It's a stark contrast to the actual reality. People think it's supposed to be quiet, easy money, maybe you're just kicking back, watching videos on your phone to kill the time. But the reality? The reality is total isolation. There is literally zero immediate backup. You are entirely alone, usually illuminated in the dark, which effectively makes you a stationary, prime target. So let's look at 4 documented case studies that brilliantly and horribly illustrate exactly what happens when this chilling reality actually sets in.
Okay, case study 1, the phantom hotel guest.
Picture this. You're completely alone, managing a 40-room hotel, just trusting the system of locked front doors and electronic key cards to keep you safe. Then, look at how this timeline unfolds. At 11 p.m., a man checks in to room 214. Everything seems, somewhat normal. Until midnight. That's when the clerk notices him sitting in the lobby, just staring blankly at a TV that isn't even turned on. By 1 a.m., the clerk checks the reservation system out of sheer boredom, only to find that room 214 is entirely vacant. No entry logs, no payment, nothing. This is where the creeping dread really begins. Over the next few hours, he's just wandering the dark halls, and by 3:30 a.m., he's standing barely 15 feet away from the desk, just watching the clerk. Refusing to blink, refusing to speak. The realization of danger didn't just snap into place. It dawned on her over several agonizing hours. That creeping dread culminates in one terrifying realization. He was never even supposed to be there. When the police finally show up after 4 a.m., they figure out the man used a stolen credit card just to bypass the front desk. He had no bags, no room. For over 5 hours, this intruder had absolute, unquestioned, free reign of the hotel. He was wandering the quiet halls, standing silently outside sleeping guests' doors, and just watching the clerk from the shadows. Those locked doors meant absolutely nothing because he was already inside. Let's move on to case study 2, the obsessive regular. We're shifting scenes to a remote rural gas station with Meredith, a 24-year-old worker. She's surrounded by miles of absolute nothingness. And this is where a predator's systematic methodology really begins to unfold. A guy named Paul starts showing up. First, he learns her exact schedule. Then, he starts analyzing her habits, and I mean really granular stuff. He notices she doesn't dot her I's on the whiteboard, she uses tiny slashes instead. Next, he actually escalates to taking covert Polaroids of her from the pitch-black parking lot while she's working outside. Finally, he's meticulously documenting every single detail of her life in a notepad. It perfectly illustrates how casual, everyday observation can just rapidly morph into a highly dangerous obsession. And then, he says this to her. "You always keep the door to the back room locked, smart." Just let that sink in for a second. The true psychological horror here is the predator casually revealing that they know your exact defense mechanisms. He was literally telling her, "I see what you do to feel safe, and I know exactly when you do it." When the police finally arrested Paul, they found the physical proof of this entire nightmare. It wasn't just that he knew her schedule. He'd actually left that covert Polaroid on her counter with her unique handwriting circled in red ink. He noticed details as incredibly specific as her shoes being a half size too big and her left eyelid twitching when she was tired. But the most unsettling part? The cops found a notepad in his car that was just completely filled with her name, written over and over again in tighter and tighter loops until it devolved into manic scribbles. It really anchors the psychological horror squarely in mundane, everyday reality. Up next, case study 3, the waiting cars. So if one stalker is terrifying, how about an organized, coordinated danger waiting just out of sight? 0. That is the exact number of license plates found on the brand new cars waiting in the parking lot. A coworker and his friend happened to visit the clerk in the middle of the night, right? And they noticed a car sitting in a blind spot, lights off, engine running, 0 license plates, just a pile of blankets in the back. And when they confronted the driver, another plateless car immediately followed it out of the lot. This instantly signals one terrifying fact. This was not a random encounter. It was a premeditated operation. Just watch how this situation escalates over 2 consecutive nights. On night 1 at 2:30 a.m., there's one visible car. The driver pretends not to speak English when approached by the coworker's friend, panics and flees. But look at night 2. At 3 a.m., the exact same car returns to that exact same blind spot. Only this time, other customers spot 2 men inside, arguing and pointing directly at the store doors. Both times, these men fled only because other customers, acting as complete random variables, disrupted their setup. The sheer presence of these bystanders completely thwarted whatever plan the men in that Subaru actually had.
Which brings us to a deeply unsettling question. What would have happened if she was truly alone? What if her coworker hadn't randomly stopped by on night 1? What if those 4 guys in a truck hadn't needed gas at 3 a.m. on night 2? Literally, the only thing protecting this clerk from an organized group and untraceable cars was pure, dumb coincidence.
Finally, we reach case study 4, the threat within.
This is Daniel's story at a rural family-owned motel. And here, the threat doesn't just watch from afar. It literally invades your personal space. Daniel was working the overnight shift, watching over 25 mostly empty motel rooms. Now, the absolute silence and isolation required to manage a place like this means you can hear everything. You hear the buildings settling, the fridge humming in the back, and most importantly, you hear the single, sharp ding of the front desk bell. It's a sound that's obviously meant to signal a customer, but on this particular night, it signaled something else entirely. Here is exactly how it played out. 2 a.m. The bell rings. Daniel walks out to the lobby. It's completely empty. 2:10 a.m. The bell rings again. Still no one. The parking lot is completely dead. 2:25 a.m. Another ring. Now the suspense and confusion are building, so Daniel decides he's going to catch the prankster. He turns the lobby lights down dim, sits in the chair directly behind the front desk, and just waits in the silence, staring right at that little metal bell. And then, after 20 minutes of just agonizing silence, a pale hand came up from under the front desk. I really want you to think about the sheer gravity and terror of that moment. The intruder wasn't just inside the building. He wasn't hiding out in a dark hallway somewhere. He was folded up under the very desk Daniel was sitting at, crouched mere inches away from his legs in the pitch dark. So Daniel absolutely bolts to the locked back office and pulls up the security camera footage. And it reveals this terrifying sequence. First, you see the chair tip over from Daniel's sheer panic. Then, from the bottom corner of the frame, eyes glare directly into the lens from behind the desk. A tall man in a hoodie crawls out on his hands and knees. He walks right over to the back office where Daniel is hiding and just slowly rattles the locked doorknob. For several agonizing minutes, while Daniel is hiding in terror waiting for the cops, the intruder casually prowls the lobby. He's even sarcastically flipping through travel brochures as if he has all the time in the world. So what binds all these accounts together? Well, this perfectly defines the anatomy of night shift terror. It is the psychological vulnerability of isolation, combined with the physical reality of being a stationary target. Whether it's the phantom guest wandering the halls of a hotel, a meticulous stalker documenting a gas station clerk's every move, organized untraceable cars waiting in the blind spots, or an intruder hiding literally inches from your feet under a motel desk, the fundamental danger is exactly the same. You are pinned in the light, while the threat commands the dark. And that brings us to the most unsettling part of all of this. When the police finally arrived at that motel, the man under the desk had already slipped out into the night. All he left behind was a rock he used to prop open the front doors. We know for a fact he was waiting under there. We know he reached up to ring the bell right in front of Daniel. But we are left with one final, truly terrifying question. What was his plan? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and we'll catch you next time.